This video will show you how to process a lease recommendation to send to the landlord for their review before issuing to a tenant. To process a lease recommendation, first log into our property and access the Lease module. Click on the Recommendations tab to view all lease recommendations to be processed. You can see the property address, the new lease start date, the recommended rent amount, the landlord's names, and the tenants' names. To the right are three icons. The note icon is used to access the recommendation details page. Alternatively, you can click on the property address. The printer icon will print the default recommendation letter, and the paper plane icon will send the default recommendation to the landlord by email. If this icon is greyed out, then the landlord either has no email address or is an invalid email. Click the search box to the right to search for a specific lease renewal recommendation if required. To process a recommendation, either click on the note icon or the property address. This will open the recommendation details page, which you can edit as required. The information in the left current column is the current lease details and cannot be edited. These are displayed for your reference. You can see all relevant information relating to the current lease, such as the paid-to date, current rental amount, lease term, start and end dates, bond details, and more. This will help you to make any decisions regarding the recommendation for the lease renewal. All details in the right Future column are for the recommendation for the lease renewal. For further help with your recommendation, our property provides quick access to several key resources at the right of the page. Details of these features are covered in another video in this series. If the lease has already been printed and signed outside of the Our Property system, click on the Upload Signed Lease button and upload the lease in the pop-up window. Before doing this step, please make sure the details in the Future column are correct, as this process will use the recommendation details to complete the lease. To process the lease recommendation, edit the details in the Future column as required. The default recommendation text to the landlord is selected automatically according to the rent value. If the rent amount is unchanged, the text will be updated to reflect no change in rent. If the rent is increased, the text will be updated to reflect the proposed increase in rent. And if the rent amount is reduced, the text will automatically update to reflect the reduction in rent. The recommendation can be edited as required. Click into the text box to edit. If you do not want to renew the lease and wish to recommend to the landlord not to renew, reduce the rental amount to $0 and add your own recommendation in the text box to inform the landlord. If the landlord accepts your recommendation not to renew, a notice to leave will be issued to the tenants and the vacate process will be started. If the lease is for a business entity, tick the GST option. To change any other details, simply click into each field to edit or select the required options from the drop-down menus. Any changes will display in green the next time you view this section to help you identify what has been changed. Change the recommended rent and the frequency if required. Remember, the recommendation text above will change to reflect any changes in the rental amount. Periods in advance is used to request the number of periods of rent to be paid in advance. The standard lease term will be automatically selected. Click to change. Any change to the lease term will automatically change the end date of the lease. You can click into each field to edit as required. Please note, if you change the start or end dates manually, you will need to ensure the lease term is correct, as this will not be automatically updated. The lease term is included in the recommendation letter to the landlord, so it is important to ensure this is correct. Bond required will update from the rental amount. Click into the field to edit if needed. If there is to be a rent increase during the lease period, click the New Rent Date field to select the new date that the new rental amount starts, and click the New Rent field to type in the new rental amount. Click into any other details and edit as required. Use the sliders to select the percentage amount a tenant is to pay for electricity, gas, phone, or other. The Tenant section allows you to review and edit the tenants if needed. To remove or add tenants, click on the Edit Tenant button. A pop-up window will appear where you can search for a tenant to add or remove a tenant by clicking on Disconnect. Please note, to add a tenant, they must have a tenant card created in your trust program and synced with our property. If you need to change the tenant's details, click on the tenant's name in either section, which will open the tenant's details page in another tab. Make the required changes, save, and refresh the recommendations page to update the tenant's details. Review any approved pets. Click the description and number field to edit as required. Type in the number of any children if needed. You can select if tenants pay for water. Click on the drop-down menu to make your selection. If the property has any body corporate or bylaws, tick the body corporate setting. If there are approved occupants other than the leaseholders, type their names in the approved occupants field. The agency's preferred emergency tradie contacts will be automatically selected. If you need to edit or add tradies, click on the Change Emergency Tradie button. The tradie menu will slide in from the right, where you can click into each field to edit as required. Click Close to hide the menu when done. Under the emergency tradies is the lease conditions. If there are any default conditions selected in your agency settings, these will be automatically added and cannot be removed. Click any condition to view its content. To add any additional conditions to the lease, click on the Lease Conditions button. A pop-up window will appear where you can select the required condition by category and then by name using the drop-down menus. If you need to create your own condition, click on the Category drop-down menu and select Special Condition. Complete the details name and full description of the condition and click on Add. If you have changed the recommendation text at the top, the saved recommendation will display the previous saved text for your reference. You can also add any notes regarding the lease renewal, which are only visible to you and your agency. Click into the text box to type your note and click the note icon to the right to add the note to the lease action. The notes will appear under the Notes text box. The landlord's name is listed under the notes for your reference. At the bottom of the page is the full action history for the current lease and for the future lease. Once you are happy with all details, you can refer your lease recommendation to the landlord. Click the Refer to Landlord button at the top of the page and select the referral method. Email will generate the recommendation letter and email to the landlord. Phone will require you to call the landlord and enter in any notes or instructions in the pop-up window. And print will print the recommendation letter for you to post to the landlord. If you have received landlord instructions outside of the Our Property process, you can approve the lease by clicking on the Landlord's Behalf button. You will need to select one of three options. Agree Recommendation will open a pop-up window where you will need to add the landlord's instructions. Select which landlord provided the instructions with the drop-down menu and by which method using the drop-down menu to select either email, phone, letter, or in person. Click on Accept Recommendation to accept the lease proposal on behalf of the landlord and send the lease to the tenant. Do Not Renew will open the same pop-up window where you will need to add the landlord's instructions, which landlord provided the instructions, and by which contact method. Please note, once the Do Not Renew button is clicked, a vacate notice is sent to the tenant and the vacate process is started. Defer Lease will defer the lease action to the selected Defer To date. You will need to add a note and click on the Defer Lease button. Preview will display the preview of the lease. Click Save to save any changes and return to the process at a later time. And click Cancel to go back. You should now know how to process a lease recommendation and refer to the landlord for their review. Please watch the other videos in this series to learn more about our property's lease module.